They say, if you haven't used it in a year, throw it out. Which is funny, because by that logic, half of us would have tossed our knees, 3 hobbies, and that dusty thing called ambition by now. But Buddhism teaches us something gentler. Not to toss things out in anger, but to release them in love. To see clearly what still serves us and what we're clinging to out of fear, guilt, or habit. Welcome to Buddhist Wisdom for the Elderly, where we don't just clean closets, we clear karma. Today, we'll explore 7 surprising things to declutter before 70, not just in your home, but in your heart. Some are physical, others are emotional. All of them are chances to practice non-attachment and rediscover peace. And if you only stay for one, make it part 4, conversations you're still having in your head. That one's a spiritual tune-up. It'll help you stop replaying old pain and start resting in the beautiful stillness of now. So subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 peaceful subscribers. Your support helps us keep sharing the Dharma in slippers and a smile. Now take a deep breath. Let's begin the sacred art of letting go together. Part 1. Expired beliefs about who you're supposed to be. We spend the first half of our lives gathering roles like badges. Parent, provider, peacemaker. The strong one, the helpful one, the one who always shows up with potato salad. And then one day, you look in the mirror and none of it quite fits anymore. It's like opening your closet and finding a collection of outfits for people you used to be. But instead of clothes, these are beliefs. Some inherited, some stitched together by society, some whispered into your ear when you were too young to question them. In Buddhism, we are taught that the self, this thing we spend decades polishing, is not fixed. It is changing, fluid, like a river that never steps into the same current twice. This idea, anatta, or not self, isn't meant to be scary. It's meant to be liberating. You're not locked into who you were at 40. You're not even required to be who you were last week. And yet, we often cling to identities that expired long ago. Like milk left too long in the fridge, except this one says, I must always be strong, or I can't ask for help, or if I stop being useful, I stop being valuable. Let me offer a small Buddhist truth bomb. Trying to hold on to a fixed identity in an impermanent world is a recipe for suffering. Carl, a sweet old soul of 75, used to be the family rock, the go-to guy. If a pipe burst, if someone was in crisis, if there was emotional damage control to be done, Carl had the tools. But when his health slowed him down, something else started to ache. Not his back, but his belief that if he wasn't fixing things, he wasn't enough. So I asked him the kind of question a monk might throw out during tea. Carl, what if your value isn't in what you do, but in the stillness you offer? He blinked, then he smiled, then he cried. Because something inside him was ready to lay down the toolbox, not just literally, but spiritually. Here's the thing. Roles are useful. They help us function in society, but they're not the truth of who we are. Think of them like masks at a costume party. You try them on, you learn from them, but you're not meant to glue them to your face. Buddhism invites us to step back and watch, observe, witness. You are not the mother. You are not the retired engineer. You are not the fixer of broken things. You are the awareness behind all those roles. And that awareness, it's spacious, peaceful, timeless. So, what beliefs are still hanging in your mental closet? I must never be a burden. If I don't stay busy, I'm wasting time. I can't change now, I'm too old. Let them go, beloved. One by one, hold them gently. Bow to them and say, thank you for serving me when I needed you. I release you now with kindness. This is a practice of compassionate letting go, a core path in Buddhism. The more you release, the lighter you become. Try this. Sit in silence. Bring to mind a belief you've held onto out of fear or habit. Ask yourself, is this still true for me? And then just breathe. If tears come, let them. That's just the old self leaving the room. You are not your history. You are not your performance. You are not what you do. You are what remains when all the doing stops. And that, my dear, is enough. Part 2. The sofa that forgot why it's here. Let me tell you something curious about growing older. At some point, you wake up one morning, shuffle to the kitchen for your tea, and trip over a footstool you didn't even know you still owned. And that's when you realize your house is full of furniture with amnesia. Seriously. Somewhere along the way, your coffee table forgot how to serve coffee. Your recliner doesn't recline so much as it moans and collapses under protest. And your dining table? It's still waiting for a Thanksgiving dinner that hasn't happened since your knees started sounding like popcorn. Now, I get it. You're not just keeping furniture. You're keeping stories. That rocking chair? That's where your late husband read the paper every morning, before the news got too depressing. That chipped end table? It was in your first apartment. The one with the leaky ceiling and dreams plastered to the walls. But here's the thing, sweetheart. Furniture isn't sacred. Presence is. There's this beautiful old man I once visited, Harold. 82, bright-eyed, and a retired piano teacher with more furniture than floor space. I walked into his living room and had to sidestep through a narrow path like a spiritual obstacle course. 4 armchairs, 2 coffee tables, 3 sideboards, and a baby grand piano nobody had touched since Bush Sr. was president. When I asked if he still played, he smiled and said, "No, but I like to remember that I used to." Ah, there it is. We do that, don't we? We keep the piano, not to play it, but to keep the echo of who we used to be. Buddhism has a word for this: attachment. Not in a judgmental, wagging the finger kind of way, but in that gentle reminder way, like your favorite aunt saying, "Honey, maybe it's time." You see, the Buddha didn't say, "Keep your love seat until the springs puncture your spirit." What he said, more or less, was, let go of clinging and you'll suffer less. Your furniture isn't the problem. It's the clinging to what it used to represent. We're not just afraid to give up the chair. We're afraid to admit that season has passed. But here's a secret. The season has already passed, darling, and you're still here. So why not make space for what's here now? When Harold finally decided to let it go, he didn't do it with sadness. He did it with jazz music playing and a mischievous glint in his eye. He gave the piano to a local school, the extra chairs to his niece. One of his old tables became a potting bench for orchids. He even lit incense as he cleaned, like he was blessing the spirits of his furniture before sending them on their next incarnation. By the end, the man could do cartwheels in his living room, well, metaphorically. And that was the point, not to get rid of things, but to invite space, to reclaim the living part of the living room. Now here's your little practice. Go stand in the doorway of your living room. Don't judge, don't pluck, and ask your heart gently, does this piece bring me rest? Does it bring me joy? Or is it just hanging around like a retired memory on life support? If it's the latter, thank it, really. Out loud if you want. Thank you for being part of my journey. I release you now. You don't have to bow, but if you do, the chair will understand. Then let it go. Because you deserve space to breathe, space to stretch, space to nap in peace without tripping over a 1992 magazine rack. Let your home reflect the soul you're living now, not the one you were trying to be 30 years ago. Remember, you're not your stuff. You're not your chairs. You're not even your good china. You're a being of light who occasionally misplaces the remote. Part 3. Old stories you keep telling yourself. Let's talk about the voices in your head. No, not the fun ones that remind you where you left your glasses on your head. I mean the ones that whisper old stories. Stories about who you were, what you should have done, why you didn't do it differently. Somewhere between your 60s and 70s, these stories start to feel more like sacred scripts. Well-rehearsed, polished, recited internally like a one-person play you've performed 1,000 times in the shower. Stories like, I always mess things up. I was never good with money. I gave too much and never got enough back. If only I had. They're sticky, aren't they? Familiar. Almost comforting. Like an old jacket that doesn't fit anymore, but hey, at least it's yours. Here's the thing. Buddhism teaches us that thoughts are just clouds passing through the sky of the mind. They're not you. They're not true just because they're familiar. They're just old patterns, habits of the mind, mental echoes. The Buddha called this sankhara, the conditioning we carry from the past, like grooves in a record. And if we're not careful, we keep playing the same song, even when we're tired of the tune. Ram Dass might say, if you don't like the movie you're watching, why do you keep buying popcorn? Wasted her life. I never lived up to my potential, she told me one afternoon. I asked, what would potential look like to you now? She paused. I guess peace, lightness, freedom from regret. I said, then maybe it's time to change the story. She blinked. I can do that? And I said, you can change the channel anytime, Dolores. And she did. She started journaling differently. She stopped saying I should've and started saying I learned. She let her old story rest, and in the silence, something new was born. Presence. Old stories can be comforting, even when they hurt. They give us something to hold on to. They make us feel like we still understand ourselves. But clinging to a painful story is like hugging a cactus. Eventually you have to ask, is this really helping me grow? Buddhism invites us to rest in what is, not what was. To be aware of the story without becoming it. You are not your past. You are the witness, the breath, the being who's still evolving. Find a quiet place, sit, breathe. Bring to mind one story you often tell yourself, especially one that hurts. Then ask, is this still true? Who would I be without this story? Can I tell a gentler version of this tale? Try replacing I should've with I did the best I could. Try replacing I always with I used to, but I'm learning. Let the old narrator take a nap. You don't need a dramatic plot anymore. You're not in the middle of a tragedy. You're in a miracle. You're still here. When we stop clinging to old stories, we make room for something astonishing. Silence. Not the lonely kind, the sacred kind. The kind where truth arises, not from the past, but from presence. You don't need to justify your life to anyone, not even yourself. You're allowed to simply be. No plot, no headline, just breath. Just this moment. Just this quiet, shining you. Part 4. Conversations you're still having in your head. You ever find yourself washing the dishes while having a full-blown argument with someone who isn't even in the room? Maybe it's your sister from 1998. Or your ex-husband, God bless him, who always left his socks everywhere, emotionally and otherwise. Or maybe it's your adult child who doesn't call enough, and you're crafting the perfect speech in your mind about why texting isn't the same thing as talking. And they're not even there. You're there, in the kitchen, with soap on your hands and World War III playing in your head. We talk a lot about decluttering our homes, but the messiest rooms are often the ones no one can see, the ones in your mind. You've got file cabinets full of unsaid things, dusty boxes labeled resentment, guilt, I should have said, and why didn't I? You've got reruns of old conversations playing on loop, sometimes with subtitles and dramatic background music. The Buddhists call this attachment to thought. The psychologists call it rumination. I call it mental furniture that blocks the hallway to peace. These conversations aren't just background noise. They affect your sleep, your breath, your posture. You think you're sitting in your favorite chair, but really you're hunched over a grudge from 20 years ago. Unfinished conversations are like emotional junk mail. You don't want to read them, but you keep them just in case. You replay the time someone hurt your feelings. You rewrite what you should have said. You rehearse imaginary comebacks like you're auditioning for a role you never actually wanted. But here's the soul truth. You don't need closure from other people to find peace within yourself. You don't have to wait for an apology that may never come. You don't need to win the argument in your mind to rest your heart. Helen was 79 and still fuming over something her brother said to her in 1976 at their father's funeral. Every time his name came up, she'd relive the whole conversation like it was happening in real time. So I gave her an odd little suggestion. "Write him a letter," I said. She frowned. "I don't want to send him anything." "You don't have to," I smiled. "You just have to set yourself free." She wrote the letter. 6 pages. Angry, funny, tender, all of it. Then she folded it up, took it outside, and burned it in a coffee tin. "Felt like I exhaled for the first time in 40 years, she told me. "You see? Sometimes healing has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with you. So here's your gentle nudge. When you catch yourself replaying an old conversation, try this. Say to the thought, 'Thank you, but I don't need this today.' Breathe in. Breathe out. Imagine yourself cleaning out a drawer labeled old arguments. Toss them, bless them, and close the drawer. You're not erasing your past. You're refusing to be trapped by it. And if it helps, write the letter. Say the thing out loud to a tree, or to your dog, or to the moon. It doesn't matter who hears it. What matters is you are no longer carrying it. When you let go of these inner conversations, something magical happens. There's more room in your mind for laughter, for wonder, for noticing how the light falls across the floor in the morning, for being here and not stuck in an old chapter that's already been written. Let your mind become less of a courtroom and more of a sanctuary. No verdicts, no trials, just quiet. You've earned that peace. Let the rest go. Part 5. Gifts you were never meant to keep. Some gifts are like little golden cages. They shimmer, they sparkle, and then they sit. For years. On shelves, in drawers, in the back of the closet next to that fondue pot you swore you'd try once. We keep them not because we love them, but because we're afraid of what it means to let them go. But here's the rub. Buddhism teaches us that clinging is suffering. And let me tell you, there's no stickier clinging than the kind tied up in a bow with someone else's expectations. Let's be clear. I'm not talking about the gifts you treasure. The photo frame from your grandchild, the quilt stitched by your mother. Keep those if they make your heart warm. But the coffee mug from the office Secret Santa in 1997, the vase your neighbor gave you that looks like it belongs in a museum of accidental art, you're not keeping those out of love. You're keeping them out of guilt. And guilt, dear friend, is not a spiritual path. It's emotional clutter dressed up as politeness. The Buddha was pretty clear about non-attachment. Not because he wanted us to live in bare caves, but because freedom arises when we're not tied to things we don't need. A true gift, from a Buddhist view, is something offered freely, with no strings, no expectations, no ownership. If someone gave you something and now that thing causes tension, obligation, or emotional weight, well, maybe the gift has already served its purpose. In Buddhist thought, everything that arises is subject to change. That includes objects and our feelings toward them. The scarf you once wore with joy might now feel itchy. The teacup that once reminded you of someone you loved may now sit in a cabinet gathering silence instead of steam. Letting go doesn't mean erasing the person or the memory. It means recognizing that the object is not the love. The object is just a finger pointing toward a moment. And that moment, it's already passed. So why hold on to the finger when the moon has already risen? If you're ready to let something go, make it holy. Hold the object, breathe with it. Say thank you for coming into my life. You brought beauty or joy or a lesson. I release you now with gratitude. Then donate it, gift it, let it move on. This is not throwing something away. This is practicing dana, the Buddhist virtue of generosity. You are giving someone else the chance to find joy in what no longer serves you. Walk through your home and find one thing, just one, that you've been keeping out of guilt. Then ask yourself, does this bring me peace? Would I miss this if I never saw it again? Am I clinging to the object or the memory it represents? If it no longer has a place in your present life, release it. Make space not just in your home, but in your heart-mind, what the Buddhists call siddha, that inner space where peace is born. Because true generosity isn't in the giving or receiving of things, it's in the freedom from needing to hold on. Part 6. Someday projects that only weigh you down. We all have a few of them. The unfinished novel in the bottom drawer, the watercolor set that's never been opened, the someday woodworking tools, neatly arranged, never used, the half-finished scrapbook you promised you'd finish before the grandkids graduated, and now they've got mortgages. These someday projects sit quietly in closets, garages, under beds. They don't make a mess in the usual way. They don't spill or stink or stack up like newspapers, but they carry a weight, a quiet, persistent kind of pressure. The kind that whispers, you should be doing more. Here's the gentle Buddhist nudge. Later is a myth. The Buddha taught that this moment is the only one we can truly know. The past is a memory, the future is a concept. Yet we live with shelves and drawers full of later. We hold on to hobbies we no longer love. We cling to plans that no longer spark joy. We keep equipment for dreams we've quietly outgrown, but are too afraid to say goodbye to. Because saying goodbye feels like admitting something, that we've changed. But dear one, that's the nature of life. That's the path. Everything is impermanent, even the goals we once held sacred. Karen, 72, had a beautiful pottery wheel in her garage. It was her retirement dream, throwing clay, making bowls, finding her inner artist. Only, she hated getting messy. Her wrists ached. And truth be told, she preferred watching documentaries with her cat, Jasper. But every time she passed the wheel, she felt guilty, like it was silently accusing her. You said you were going to create. Until one day she sat down and asked, do I even want this anymore? The answer was a quiet, liberating no. So she gave it away to a local high school art program. A few weeks later, she got a thank you note from a teenager who had never touched clay before and who now wanted to become a sculptor. Karen cried, and then she laughed, and then she made tea and curled up with Jasper, guilt-free. The Buddha talked often about non-craving, that desire and attachment are what keep us cycling through dissatisfaction. Someday projects are a kind of craving in disguise. They're rooted in the belief that we'll finally be fulfilled once we paint the masterpiece, learn the piano, start the YouTube channel. But the deeper truth? You don't need to become anything. You already are. Letting go of the someday isn't failure, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that your energy is precious, that peace is better than pressure, that sitting with tea and a quiet smile may be more sacred than any sculpture. Here's something to try. 1. Go to that closet or shelf where the someday stuff lives. 2. Pick up each item. Hold it with love. 3. Ask, does this still bring me joy, or just a sense of obligation? 4. If it's the latter, bless it and let it go. You can even say, this dream served me once. I release it now with love. And feel how your body responds. The exhale, the relief, the gentle return to presence. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to check off every dream you scribbled down at 40. You just need to be present for this breath. This moment, the most beautiful art you can create now. A life that feels light, spacious, honest, free of shoulds. You've earned that freedom. Let the rest go. Part 7. Identities. Hanging in the closet. Let's open the closet, shall we? No, not the metaphorical closet where we keep our secret dreams and half-buried guilt. I'm talking about the one in your bedroom. The one you've been avoiding for years because every time you open it, it tries to avalanche you with shoulder pads and denim jackets from a bygone era. There's a strange thing that happens when we get older. We stop wearing our clothes, but we keep wearing our identities. And oh, how we pack them in, like sweaters we might need again, just in case. You know the ones. The professional suit from when you were a teacher or a nurse or a manager, back when people called you sir or ma'am and not dear. The party dress from a time when people still asked you to dance. the workout gear from a very ambitious New Year's resolution. In 2009, we keep these things not because they serve us, but because they remind us of who we used to be, when we were useful, attractive, needed, or praised. They hang like costumes in the wings, just waiting for us to step back into an old role. But the thing is, my love, the play has changed. Clothing, like identity, has a strange weight. It doesn't just sit on hangers, it hangs on the heart. And just like a pair of pants you can't quite zip up anymore, some of those old versions of you don't fit like they used to. You've grown out of them, not in a bad way, oh no, in the best way. But still we hesitate to let them go, because what if we're not sure who we are without them? That's the sacred fear, the soft whisper of impermanence. The Buddhist teachings speak to this beautifully. You are not fixed. You are not a role, a label, a job title. You are not your genes, your hair color, or your place in the family tree. You are the awareness behind all of it, the quiet watcher of change. So go ahead and laugh with me here, because one day you wake up and realize your closet has better memory than you do. It's still holding on to a career you left 20 years ago, and a waistline from before. Elastic became your best friend. Here's what I tell folks who ask me how to declutter their closet. Start with the loudest ghosts, the clothes that speak of obligation, the ones you feel guilty for not wearing, the ones that say, remember when you were. Take them gently off the hanger, fold them like a farewell letter, and say, thank you for who you helped me be. Then bless them. Donate them. Let someone else make new memories with them. You're not betraying your past. You're respecting your present. Barbara was 74 and had a closet the size of a small nation. She had church dresses, teaching blouses, golf skirts. She never played golf, and a fur coat she swore she was going to wear someday when it's finally cold enough in Arizona. She confessed to me, every morning I stand there and stare at all this stuff, and then I wear the same 2 shirts. So I asked her, why do you keep the rest? She paused and said, because I used to be someone else. And there it was. So we made it a ritual, a release ceremony. She picked up each item, held it to her heart, and said, I am no longer this, but I thank you. By the end, she kept 10 items. Her closet could breathe. And so could she. Go into your closet not just with a trash bag, but with awareness. You're not just sorting clothes. You're meeting your former selves. Be kind to them. Then let them go. Keep what supports your life now. Keep what fits your body now. Keep what feels like a hug, not a performance. Because who you are now isn't less than who you were. It's just different. And difference, my dear, is where wisdom lives. Let the old costumes go. You don't need them anymore. You've already earned the robe of presence. So what did we really declutter today? Not just chairs and teapots. Not just Tupperware and tired sweaters. We let go of old identities, expired beliefs, unfinished conversations, and the mental attic full of someday I will. We made space, real space for peace, for clarity, for presence. Because as the Buddha gently reminded us, freedom isn't found in what you own. It's found in what you no longer need to carry. Now, you might not remember all 7 parts tomorrow morning, but maybe you'll remember this. Your home and your heart deserve to feel light. And sometimes the most loving act isn't holding on, it's letting go. If something in this video touched you, if it made you laugh, tear up, or just quietly nod, share it with a friend. Leave a comment about what you're ready to release, and subscribe to join us on this gentle path of Buddhist wisdom for elders. Let's keep walking together, one mindful step and one donated recliner at a time. Thanks for being here. And remember, the less you cling, the more you fly.